The prevailing intellectual tradition of the modern era has frequently positioned rationality and emotion as antagonists, suggesting that the clarity of the intellect is constantly besieged by the chaotic impulses of the heart. This dichotomous view posits that to be intelligent is to be stoic, suppressing the affective dimension of human experience in favor of cold logic. However, contemporary psychological understanding, as synthesized in the foundational literature on emotional intelligence, fundamentally rejects this binary. The core problem facing the modern individual is not the presence of emotion, but rather a profound illiteracy regarding its function, structure, and utility. Far from being the antithesis of intelligence, the emotional faculty represents a distinct and sophisticated data processing system, a unique intersection where cognitive perception meets physiological response. The challenge, therefore, lies in the fact that while every human being possesses this machinery, few are equipped with the operating manual necessary to decipher its signals. Without a robust framework for understanding the mechanics of feeling, individuals remain at the mercy of subconscious drivers, misinterpreting the vital data their own bodies and minds are constantly generating. To grasp the magnitude of this deficit, one must first interrogate the biological and evolutionary necessity of the emotional apparatus. Emotions are not vestigial defects in the human operating system. They are, in fact, primary survival mechanisms. In the most primal sense, emotions function as rapid response sentinels. When an organism encounters a threat, the luxury of deliberate, rational analysis is often fatal. In such moments, basic emotions like fear, disgust, or anger bypass the slower, deliberative circuits of the neocortex to instigate immediate action, fight or flight. This automaticity protects physical integrity. However, the utility of emotion extends far beyond mere survival. In the complex landscape of human interaction, social emotions such as guilt, shame, gratitude, and love act as the binding agents of community. They guide behavior within the tribe, enforcing norms and fostering the bonds required for cooperative existence. Furthermore, the emotional spectrum serves as the wellspring of creativity. The despair of grief or the fervor of anger often catalyzes artistic expression that rational thought alone could never conceive. The problem arises when individuals fail to recognize this positive intent. When emotions are viewed as intruders rather than messengers, the critical information they carry regarding safety, social cohesion, or creative potential is lost or suppressed. A granular analysis of emotional experience reveals that what is colloquially termed a feeling is actually a complex, tripartite phenomenon. An emotion is not a single event but a dynamic interplay of three distinct aspects: the cognitive, the physiological, and the behavioral. Understanding this anatomy is crucial because these components do not fire in a fixed linear sequence. They operate in a volatile feedback loop where any one element can trigger or amplify the others. Consider the experience of anger. It may manifest first as a physiological surge, tensed muscles, accelerated heart rate, and rapid breathing. This physical state may then precipitate a behavioral reaction, such as a raised voice or a physical outburst, which in turn solidifies a cognitive judgment, the thought that one has been wronged or that a situation is intolerable. Conversely, the cycle may begin with the thought itself, which subsequently instructs the body to prepare for conflict and the behavior to become aggressive. The opacity of this process is a central part of the problem. Without the ability to deconstruct an emotion into its constituent parts, thoughts, physical sensations, and behaviors, an individual cannot hope to intervene in the cycle. They remain reactive, swept away by a torrent of sensation and impulse that feels monolithic and uncontrollable, rather than composed of discrete, manageable elements. This complexity is further compounded by the difficulty of classification. The human emotional landscape is vast, yet the average vocabulary for describing it is often remarkably limited. While some theorists posit a reductionist model consisting of a few primary emotions, such as joy, surprise, fear, disgust, anger, and sadness, the reality of human experience is far more nuanced. Much like primary colors blending to create a limitless spectrum of hues, these basic emotions combine to form sophisticated emotional states. For instance, the feeling of contempt can be understood as a corrosive alloy of anger and disgust, while optimism may be parsed as a fusion of joy and anticipation. Models such as the emotional wheel attempt to map these relationships, suggesting that every primary emotion has a polar opposite, anticipation versus surprise. For example, and that varying intensities of these core feelings create the texture of daily life. The inability to distinguish between closely related emotional states, such as envy and jealousy, or to recognize that disappointment is a derivative of sadness, leads to a low-resolution perception of one's own psyche. When an individual cannot name their specific emotional state, they cannot address the specific need that the emotion is signaling. A general sense of feeling awful provides no actionable data, whereas identifying a specific feeling of remorse clearly indicates a need to make amends. One of the most elusive aspects of the emotional problem set is the phenomenon of intuition, the immediate, subconscious knowing that bridges emotion and reason. Intuition operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, rapidly synthesizing past experiences, sensory data, and emotional memories to deliver a verdict on the present moment. It is the feeling that something is off in a situation where the logical facts seem to align, or conversely, the sudden certainty that a choice is correct despite a lack of complete information. This faculty relies on the brain's ability to recognize patterns and match current sensory inputs, sights, sounds, and even atmospheric details, with stored emotional templates. However, in a world dominated by hyper-rationalism and constant distraction, the subtle frequency of intuition is often drowned out. The noise of external demands and the clutter of conscious thought obscure these intuitive signals. The failure to tune into this frequency deprives individuals of a critical guidance system, one that connects the deep data processing power of the subconscious with the decision-making faculties of the conscious mind. The problem of emotional illiteracy extends outward into the realm of communication. It is a well-documented assertion in communication theory that the semantic content of speech, the actual words spoken, constitutes a mere fraction of the total message conveyed. A dominant portion of emotional communication is nonverbal, transmitted through facial expressions, posture, gestures, and tone of voice. This creates a landscape where the truth of an interaction is often found not in what is said, but in how it is said. A person may verbally offer congratulations, but a lack of eye contact, a strained pitch, or a rigid posture may betray underlying envy or insincerity. This discrepancy creates a cognitive dissonance for the receiver, who feels that something is amiss but may lack the framework to articulate why. The challenge here is twofold. One must possess the acuity to read the nonverbal leakage of others to discern their true emotional state, and one must also possess the self-awareness to recognize when one's own nonverbal signals are contradicting one's words. The failure to align these channels results in confusion, mistrust, and the breakdown of social rapport. Furthermore, the fundamental relationship individuals have with their own emotions is often corrupted by a linguistic and psychological displacement of responsibility. It is a common linguistic habit to attribute one's emotional state to external agents, to say, "You made me angry," or "This situation is depressing me." This externalization is a defense mechanism that casts the individual in the role of a victim, passive and helpless before the actions of others. It rests on the flawed premise that emotions are injected from the outside, rather than generated from within. In reality, while external events serve as stimuli, the emotional response is an internal creation, filtered through personal interpretations, values, and biological predispositions. By abdicating ownership of their feelings, individuals inadvertently surrender their power to manage them. If the anger is caused solely by another person, then the only remedy is for that person to change, a locus of control that is almost entirely ineffective. The shift to owning feelings, acknowledging, "I feel angry," rather than "you made me angry," is a prerequisite for emotional intelligence, yet it remains a profound stumbling block for many. This abdication of responsibility often stems from a confusion between physical and emotional needs. Physical needs, food, water, shelter, sleep, are universally recognized as essential for survival, and the body signals deficits in these areas through unmistakable sensations like hunger or fatigue. Emotional needs, such as the need for acceptance, appreciation, validation, and connection, are equally vital for psychological homeostasis but are far easier to neglect or misinterpret. Just as individuals vary in their caloric requirements, they vary significantly in their emotional requirements. Some may require high levels of autonomy, while others require deep security and constant reassurance. The problem arises when individuals expect these needs to be fulfilled passively by their environment or their relationships, much in the same way an infant expects to be fed. There is a prevalent, unspoken expectation that partners, friends, or colleagues are responsible for alleviating boredom, soothing anxiety, or providing validation. This dependency creates a cycle of disappointment and resentment. Emotional intelligence dictates that just as an adult is responsible for feeding themselves when hungry, they are responsible for initiating the actions required to meet their emotional needs, reaching out when lonely, seeking stimulation when bored, or generating self-worth when unappreciated. Underpinning these dysfunctional patterns are deep-seated beliefs and expectations regarding emotion itself, often rooted in early developmental conditioning. Many individuals are raised in environments where specific emotions were categorized as bad, wrong, or weak. A child reprimanded for showing anger or mocked for showing fear learns to suppress these signals, creating a schism between their felt experience and their external expression. This conditioning instills a belief system that valorizes emotional stoicism and stigmatizes vulnerability. Consequently, adults may find themselves judging their own internal states, feeling guilty for feeling resentful, or feeling ashamed of their own jealousy. This meta-emotion, feeling bad about feeling bad, compounds the original distress and prevents the processing of the primary emotion. Furthermore, societal norms often dictate what one should feel in a given situation: instant forgiveness after an apology, or immediate grief at a funeral. When one's actual internal state does not match these prescribed norms, the result is confusion and self-condemnation. This denial of the authentic emotional self severs the connection to the positive intent of the emotion, leaving the individual unable to decipher the message the emotion is trying to convey. Finally, the landscape of the problem is populated by emotional triggers, specific, often idiosyncratic stimuli that bypass rational thought and provoke disproportionate reactions. These triggers are the landmines of the emotional psyche. They are forged from past experiences, memories, and traumas, linking a present-day event, like a tone of voice, a specific phrase, or a perceived slight, to a historical pain. For one person, a critical comment about their appearance may be a minor annoyance. For another, it may trigger a cascade of humiliation and defensive rage rooted in childhood bullying. These reactions are instantaneous and often baffling to both the subject and the observer. The trigger initiates a hijack, where the emotional centers of the brain override the executive functions. The individual reacts not to the present reality, but to the ghost of a past experience. Without the skills to identify these personal triggers and understand their origins, individuals are doomed to repeat automatic, destructive behavioral loops. They remain reactive machines, their buttons easily pushed by circumstance, unaware that the intensity of their response is a reflection of their own history rather than the severity of the immediate event. The confluence of these factors, the misunderstanding of the tripartite nature of emotion, the lack of a nuanced vocabulary, the disconnection from intuition, the failure to read nonverbal cues, the externalization of responsibility, the neglect of emotional needs, the limiting beliefs surrounding negative feelings, and the susceptibility to unconscious triggers, constitutes the central problem of the unexamined emotional life. It creates a state of existence where the individual is estranged from their own internal guidance system. Instead of serving as sophisticated data points that inform decision-making, enhance relationships, and ensure safety, emotions become sources of confusion, stress, and volatility. The intellect attempts to govern in a vacuum, ignoring the rich, albeit sometimes turbulent, stream of information flowing from the affective self. This suppression does not eliminate emotion, it merely drives it underground, where it festers and erupts in unregulated ways. The challenge, therefore, is to dismantle the misconceptions that relegate emotion to the status of an irrational nuisance and to begin the work of mapping the internal terrain. Only by acknowledging the legitimacy and structure of the emotional world can one hope to navigate it with skill and intentionality. The problem is not that we feel, but that we do not know how to read the language of our feelings, leaving us functionally illiterate in the most fundamental aspect of our humanity. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Deep Thinker, and hit that like button if you enjoy self-improvement content. Also, don't forget to share this with your friends and family. Alright, let's get back to it. The recognition of emotional illiteracy as a fundamental human problem, as established in the preceding analysis, inevitably leads to a confrontation with the volatile mechanics of emotional management. It is one thing to understand theoretically that emotions are tripartite systems composed of thought, physiology, and behavior, it is an entirely different challenge to govern these systems when they are fully activated. The agitation phase of the emotional experience is characterized by a relentless friction between the primal, automatic reactions of the biological substrate and the conscious, reasoned intentions of the intellect. This struggle is not merely a philosophical abstraction but a visceral, physiological reality that plays out in the daily theater of human existence. The central tension lies in the fact that while the emotional brain is built for speed and survival, the modern environment demands nuance, patience, and social calibration. When these two imperatives collide, the individual is often left grappling with a torrent of high arousal states, anger, anxiety, stress, or sinking into the corrosive quicksand of low arousal states like disappointment, loneliness, and regret. The first battleground in this conflict is the physical body itself. Emotional states are not ethereal concepts floating in the mind. They are grounded in somatic reality. A pervasive misunderstanding is that the mind commands the body in a unidirectional flow of authority. However, the relationship is deeply reciprocal. Nonverbal communication, posture, gesture, eye contact, and vocal tonality constitutes the vast majority of emotional signaling, dwarfing the semantic content of speech. Crucially, this dynamic operates internally as well as externally. A collapsed posture, characterized by slumped shoulders and a downward gaze, does not merely reflect a lack of confidence, it actively generates and reinforces feelings of inadequacy. Conversely, the deliberate adoption of a confident stance, an erect spine, leveled head, and open limbs, can reverse engineer the emotional state, signaling to the brain that the organism is secure and capable. This phenomenon suggests that the acting as if principle is not a form of deception but a neurological lever. By consciously manipulating the behavioral component of the emotional triad, an individual can force a recalibration of the physiological and cognitive components. The agitation arises because most individuals remain unaware of this feedback loop, allowing their unconscious physical habits to dictate their internal weather, thereby trapping themselves in cycles of passivity or anxiety. Among the most turbulent of these internal weather patterns is the experience of anger. Anger acts as a high-octane fuel, often ignited by a perception of injustice, unfairness, or blocked goals. Unlike sadness, which withdraws energy, anger mobilizes it, flooding the system with adrenaline and preparing the body for confrontation. The danger of anger lies not in the emotion itself, which carries a positive intent of self-protection and boundary enforcement, but in its capacity to hijack the rational faculties. When the red mist descends, the reasoning brain is effectively bypassed. The immediate challenge is not to suppress the anger, which typically results in a pressure cooker effect, but to engage a physiological brake. This is where the mechanics of breathing become operational tools rather than mere biological necessities. By consciously extending the exhalation phase of the breath, the individual stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, forcibly slowing the heart rate and re-engaging the prefrontal cortex. Without this mechanical intervention, the angry individual is liable to act on temporary impulses that create permanent consequences, mistaking the intensity of the feeling for the validity of the action. Parallel to the explosive nature of anger is the pervasive, crushing weight of stress. In the contemporary landscape, stress is rarely the result of a singular, catastrophic event. Rather, it is the accumulation of relentless, low-grade pressures, deadlines, expectations, sensory overload, and the fragmentation of attention. This state of being overwhelmed compromises cognitive function, leading to a kind of mental myopia where the ability to prioritize and plan is degraded. The agitation here is the feeling of drowning in demands while simultaneously losing the capacity to swim. The antidote requires a counterintuitive deceleration. By physically slowing down movements and actions by a calculated margin, the individual interrupts the feedback loop of panic. Furthermore, the practice of carving out a breathing space, a deliberate pause in the torrent of activity, allows for the reassertion of executive control. However, the impulse to rush is seductive, and resisting it requires a significant exertion of will, creating a secondary layer of tension between the compulsion to speed up and the necessity to slow down. While anger and stress represent high-energy states, the emotional landscape is also populated by the heavy, sinking gravity of disappointment and sadness. Disappointment is the specific emotional recoil from the gap between expectation and reality. It strikes when a desired outcome, a job offer, a relationship milestone, a social event, fails to materialize. The immediate cognitive response is often a spiral of discouragement and cynicism. The agitation stems from the refusal to accept the reality of the loss. The individual remains fixated on the unhappened event, unable to pivot toward the new reality. Emotional intelligence in this context demands a painful process of sitting with the discomfort. Unlike the active management of anger, managing disappointment and sadness requires a form of passive endurance, an acceptance that allows the psyche to metabolize the loss. Sadness, in particular, serves a crucial evolutionary function. It slows the organism down to facilitate adjustment to new circumstances. The modern tendency to rush through grief or medicate away sorrow circumvents this necessary biological process, leaving the individual stranded in a state of unresolved loss, unable to integrate the experience and move forward. Closely related to disappointment are the retrospective emotions of regret, remorse, and guilt. These feelings are the ghosts of the past haunting the present. Regret focuses on the self, the sorrow over a chosen path or a missed opportunity. I wish I hadn't taken that job. Remorse, a darker variant, focuses on the harm done to others. I wish I hadn't hurt my friend. Guilt, the manifestation of a violated moral code, can be a constructive force when it is legitimate, when one has actually committed a transgression that requires reparation. The agitation, however, often arises from imagined guilt, the debilitating sense of responsibility for events or feelings that were never within the individual's control. This includes the survivor's guilt of escaping a calamity unharmed or the codependent guilt of failing to fix a partner's unhappiness. This misplaced responsibility creates a Sisyphean struggle where the individual exhausts themselves trying to atone for sins they did not commit. The management of these retrospective states requires a rigorous cognitive audit, distinguishing between what was within one's control and what was not, making amends where actual harm was caused, and then engaging the difficult discipline of self-forgiveness. To forgive oneself is not to condone the error but to refuse to remain its prisoner. In the social realm, the agitation becomes even more complex as emotions are refracted through the lens of comparison and status. Envy and jealousy, often conflated, represent distinct forms of interpersonal distress. Jealousy is a defensive emotion, rooted in the fear of losing something one possesses, usually a relationship or a valued status, to a rival. It is a volatile cocktail of fear, anger, and insecurity that can lead to hypervigilance and possessiveness. Envy, by contrast, is the pain of wanting what another possesses. It acts as a microscope, magnifying the other person's blessings while blurring the context of their struggles, simultaneously diminishing one's own perception of self-worth. The toxicity of envy lies in its ability to turn admiration into resentment. The challenge is to transmute this counting of other people's blessings into a catalyst for personal ambition. Rather than stewing in the bitterness of, "it's not fair," the emotionally intelligent response involves decoding the envy to reveal the hidden desire, and then formulating a plan to achieve that desire independently. This shift from passive resentment to active goal setting is energetically demanding and requires confronting one's own feelings of inadequacy. The fear of social judgment also manifests as embarrassment, a sensation of exposure and awkwardness that can feel like a social death. The physical reaction, blushing, stammering, the urge to flee, is an involuntary admission of error or breach of social norms. The agitation here is the intense desire to become invisible at the precise moment one is most visible. Paradoxically, the attempt to hide or deny the embarrassing event usually amplifies the awkwardness. The most effective, yet most difficult, management strategy is to lean into the discomfort, to acknowledge the error, apologize if necessary, and demonstrate the resilience to laugh at oneself. This requires a robust ego capable of separating one's total worth from a momentary lapse. A different form of social distress is found in loneliness, which must be distinguished from the physical state of solitude. Loneliness is an emotional isolation, a feeling of disconnection that can persist even in a crowded room. It signals an unmet need for belonging and understanding. The danger of loneliness lies in its potential to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The pain of isolation can lead to withdrawal, which further deepens the isolation. Managing this requires the proactive courage to reach out, to forge connections through shared interests, volunteering, or community engagement, despite the lethargy and sadness that loneliness induces. When these emotional needs, for connection, validation, relief from stress, are not met directly, the agitation often leaks out through maladaptive channels. One of the most common is emotional eating or drinking. Here, the individual attempts to stuff down feelings of boredom, sadness, or anxiety with food. The physiological satisfaction of eating provides a temporary chemical distraction from the emotional void. However, because the hunger is emotional rather than physical, it cannot be sated by calories. This leads to a cycle of consumption followed by guilt, adding another layer of emotional distress to the original problem. Breaking this cycle requires the mindfulness to surf the urge, to observe the craving as a temporary wave of intensity that will peak and break, rather than a command that must be obeyed. It demands that the individual pause and identify the true feeling beneath the hunger, replacing the food with a response that actually addresses the emotional need, such as comfort, rest, or stimulation. The friction of emotional life is perhaps most abrasive in the arena of interpersonal conflict, particularly when dealing with criticism and blame. Criticism, whether fair or unfair, is typically received as an attack, triggering an immediate defensive crouch or a counter-offensive strike. The ego interprets the critique as a negation of the self. The agitation involves suppressing this reflex to filter the message for validity. If the criticism contains truth, it is a tool for growth. If it is baseless, it is a reflection of the critic's own biases. Similarly, the dynamic of blame serves as a convenient trapdoor to escape responsibility. By assigning fault to external agents, the boss, the partner, the weather, the individual creates a narrative of victimhood. While this provides temporary relief from the burden of accountability, it ultimately renders the individual powerless. To manage blame is to reclaim agency, to ask, "What is my role in this?" and "What is my solution?" regardless of who caused the problem. This reclamation of agency is the pivot point where emotional management transforms into emotional intelligence. It requires the cultivation of willpower, not as a grim, white-knuckled resistance, but as a strategic deployment of attention. Willpower is the resource that allows an individual to stick to long-term intentions when short-term emotions are screaming for immediate gratification. It is a finite resource, easily depleted by fatigue or hunger, and therefore must be guarded and replenished. It is linked to the capacity for patience, which is not merely the ability to wait, but the ability to maintain a calm and positive attitude while waiting. Impatience is a rejection of the present moment, a form of low-grade anger at the pace of reality. Patience, conversely, is an assertion of control over one's own internal tempo, independent of external delays. The agitation phase, therefore, is a comprehensive portrait of the human struggle to self-regulate. It is the realization that emotions are not merely things that happen to us, but energies that require active, skilled stewardship. Whether it is the heat of anger, the weight of guilt, the sting of envy, or the fog of stress, each emotional state presents a specific puzzle. The pieces of this puzzle are physiological, breath, posture, cognitive, reframing, planning, and behavioral, acting as if surfing the urge. The failure to solve these puzzles leaves the individual at the mercy of their biochemistry, reacting blindly to triggers and repeating historical patterns. The success in solving them does not eliminate the emotion. The anger, the sadness, and the fear remain part of the human experience, but it changes the outcome. It transforms the emotion from a master into a messenger, and eventually, into a tool. This transition from reactive turmoil to proactive mastery sets the stage for the higher-order functions of emotional and social intelligence, the ability not just to survive the storm, but to navigate it with purpose, courage, and empathy. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Deep Thinker, and hit that like button if you enjoy self-improvement content. Also, don't forget to share this with your friends and family. Alright, let's get back to it. The transition from merely surviving the turbulence of emotional life to actively mastering it requires a fundamental shift in orientation. If the agitation phase is characterized by the reactive management of distress, the containment of anger, the metabolization of sadness, and the regulation of stress, the solution phase is defined by the proactive cultivation of emotional and social intelligence. This is not simply a matter of dampening negative inputs, but of constructing a robust psychological architecture capable of generating positive outputs. The solution lies in moving beyond the role of a firefighter extinguishing emotional blazes to that of an architect designing a life where the structural integrity of the self is reinforced by specific cognitive and behavioral skills. This higher-order development bifurcates into two distinct but interrelated domains: the refinement of internal emotional competencies, and the skillful navigation of the external social landscape. The foundation of this proactive development is the deliberate practice of positive thinking, which must be distinguished from the naive suppression of reality. Genuine optimism is not the denial of difficulty but the maintenance of motivation amidst it. It involves a cognitive restructuring where the individual refuses to be paralyzed by the negative aspects of a situation. A potent mechanism for this restructuring is the linguistic pivot, the strategic insertion of a conjunction that forces the mind to acknowledge a silver lining. By appending a contradictory clause to a negative thought, acknowledging the rain, but recognizing the opportunity to read indoors, the individual exerts control over their interpretive framework. This cognitive agility is essential for managing the inevitability of change. Resilience in the face of shifting circumstances, whether economic downturns, career pivots, or personal upheavals, depends on the willingness to adapt rather than rigid adherence to the status quo. The emotionally intelligent response to change mimics the wisdom of a swimmer caught in a riptide. Rather than exhausting energy fighting the current, one accepts the drift in order to eventually navigate back to solid ground. Acceptance, in this context, is not resignation. It is the strategic conservation of energy for battles that can actually be won. This resilience requires the cultivation of courage, a virtue often misunderstood as the absence of fear. In the emotional intelligence paradigm, courage is reconceptualized as the judgment that a specific objective is more valuable than the fear it induces. It is the capacity to act in direct opposition to the survival instinct's plea for safety when a higher principle or goal is at stake. This might manifest as the bravery to articulate a difficult truth, the fortitude to pursue a new career path, or the simple act of facing a social anxiety. Closely linked to courage is the development of curiosity. As individuals mature, the innate inquisitiveness of childhood often atrophies, replaced by the rigidity of judgment. Reclaiming an open mind, the willingness to ask why and how, to suspend verdicts, and to explore alien perspectives, is a powerful antidote to emotional stagnation. Curiosity serves as the intellectual engine of empathy. One cannot understand another's feeling without first being curious about their experience. The mastery of the self also demands the rigorous training of patience and willpower. Impatience is fundamentally a rejection of the present reality, a source of friction that generates heat but no forward motion. Developing patience involves reframing the waiting period not as empty time to be endured with irritation, but as a neutral space to be inhabited with composure. Willpower, the fuel of self-regulation, allows the individual to adhere to long-term intentions against the gravitational pull of short-term impulses. It is the muscle that enforces the surf the urge technique, preventing the collapse of resolve in the face of temptation. These internal disciplines culminate in the ability to make confident decisions. The paralysis of analysis often stems from a fear of the unknown, yet emotional intelligence accepts that uncertainty is an indelible feature of choice. By balancing the logical assessment of pros and cons with the intuitive data provided by the gut, the individual learns to make decisions not with a guarantee of success, but with the confidence that they can handle the outcome, whatever it may be. Crucially, the developed self must establish a perimeter. The concept of boundaries extends beyond physical space to the emotional realm. Without defined limits, an individual is vulnerable to becoming a repository for the anxieties and demands of others. Establishing emotional boundaries involves the crucial realization that one is not responsible for the happiness or emotional regulation of another adult. This delineation protects empathy from degenerating into codependency. It allows one to stand near another's pain without being consumed by it. Within these boundaries, the skill of assertiveness allows for the clear transmission of needs and wants. Assertiveness is the golden mean between the passivity of the doormat and the aggression of the bully. It is the respectful but firm declaration of one's position, often requiring a negotiation where the individual bends as far as possible without breaking their own fundamental values. The capstone of this internal development is the construction of genuine confidence, a belief in one's own efficacy. Confidence is not a static trait but a dynamic quality that can be synthesized through action. The psychological principle that behavior influences thought, acting as if, provides a powerful tool for self-transformation. By voluntarily adopting the posture, tone, and behaviors of a confident, interested, or calm person, the individual triggers the corresponding neurochemical and cognitive states. The act precedes the feeling. This reverse engineering of emotion proves that one need not wait for the mood to strike to take action. Rather, taking action summons the mood. As the individual stabilizes their internal world, the focus of the solution expands outward to the realm of social intelligence. The primary interface of social connection is the act of listening. However, true social intelligence requires listening for feelings rather than merely for facts. It involves scanning the speaker's broadcast for the emotional subtext, the fear beneath the anger, the disappointment beneath the silence. This depth of listening is the prerequisite for empathy, the ability to vicariously experience the world through another's frame of reference. Empathy is not about offering solutions or declaring, "I know how you feel," which often alienates. It is about validating the difficulty of the other person's experience. It is the simple, powerful acknowledgement that their pain or confusion is real and significant to them. This empathic foundation is essential when managing the volatile emotions of others. When facing an angry individual, the social adept creates a containment vessel for the other's rage, listening without interruption and resisting the urge to defend or counterattack until the emotional pressure has dissipated. By validating the anger without necessarily agreeing with its cause, one can de-escalate a potential conflict into a problem-solving dialogue. Similarly, the delivery of disappointment, breaking bad news, requires a delicate balance of honesty and compassion. It involves setting the context, delivering the news directly, and then tending to the emotional fallout without retreating into cold detachment or overwhelming guilt. The texture of social life is smoothed by the consistent application of kindness and consideration. These are not soft virtues but strategic social lubricants that build banks of goodwill. Anticipating the needs of others, whether it be the punctuality that respects their time or the small gesture that acknowledges their burden, creates a reciprocal environment of respect. This regard for others extends to the complex dynamics of groups. A socially intelligent actor observes the undercurrents of group interaction, noticing who is marginalized and who is dominating, and intervenes to balance the dynamic. This might involve gently bringing a quiet member into the fold or, conversely, employing polite but firm tactics to interrupt and redirect a person who is monopolizing the conversation. Leadership within the social sphere, whether in a family, a friendship group, or a workplace, relies on the dual ability to motivate and inspire. Motivation engages the rational mind by aligning tasks with rewards and reasons, while inspiration ignites the emotional spirit by connecting actions to values and visions. The effective delegator uses these tools to distribute burdens, not by dumping tasks, but by empowering others to take ownership, thereby fostering trust and competence. When conflicts of interest inevitably arise, the solution lies in the art of compromise, the negotiation of a middle ground where both parties feel heard and where the relationship is prioritized over the absolute victory of one side. Finally, the solution to the problem of emotional illiteracy involves the courage to navigate the most difficult of social interactions, the confrontation. Whether dealing with the passive-aggressive punishment of the silent treatment or the need to deliver criticism, the approach is always one of I statements and objective observation rather than accusation. Breaking a silence requires the vulnerability to ask what is wrong and the fortitude to apologize if necessary, without accepting indefinite punishment. Giving criticism requires stripping away the attack to reveal the specific request for improvement, focusing on the future solution rather than the past error. In synthesis, the solution is the integration of these skills into a seamless way of being. Emotional intelligence is not a destination but a continuous process of tuning the instrument of the self. It is the recognition that the head and the heart are not enemies but partners. By understanding the data emotions provide, managing the energy they generate, and skillfully navigating the web of human connection, the individual moves from a state of emotional confusion to one of intuitive clarity. The result is a life where emotions vivify rather than victimize, and where the connection to self and others is defined by understanding, resilience, and depth.